So, let us simply continue where we left off in our previous lesson. So, in this lesson, we will talk about the present tense indicative active, and unsurprisingly, we have a verb root, and we are adding stuff to it. But we do have two types of verbs, technically three, but the third group literally consists out of just 10 verbs. So, the weak verbs, which will be today's focus, and the strong verbs. A quick example: to call, with the verb root kall. Now, adding eth, which is the ending for the second person plural, we are getting kallith. Then it means y'all call. So we just need the right verb root and adding the right ending to it. Speaking of the endings, we have the following. The first person singular does not have any suffix for the ending. The plural has The second person singular, as well as the third person singular, have both r as the ending. And the second person plural, as we already have discussed, is iv. Now, the third person plural, as well as the infinitive, both end in r. Now, this was technically the main part of today's lesson, but there is a little bit more I would need to explain. You see, the phrase ek kalla, which means I call, as well as I do call and I'm calling. More on this later. Here, it seems to be that the verb kalla has an ending r, but we did say the first person singular does not have any suffix as a personal ending, and that is still true. You see, to understand this, we must know that there's a difference between verb stem, which I did not say for a reason, and a verb root. You see, kall is not a verb stem, but a verb root. And for us here, with Old Norse weak verbs, we have the following. A verb stem does consist out of the verb root and the linking vowel, in this case r. We have more or less three main classes of weak verbs, which are, you guessed it, divided by their thematic vowel. So we have class 1 verbs. They have e or y, for example, telja, which means to tell. Then class 2 verbs. Those are the ones with r, for example, kalla. And then we have class 3 verbs, which somehow also have e. It would be too much to go into detail. Just know they are slightly different. Now, sometimes you may encounter conjugation groups 1 to 4 instead of classes, and we will most likely stick to the conjugation groups instead of the classes, simply because a lot of my resources are using this terminology or grouping. And in our next lesson, I will be talking about them. For now, that is all you need to know. Do not worry too much about it just now. Just know that they exist and that we have thematic vowels. But now, you may wonder, if that is the case, what the bloody hell is with kallith? Where is the thematic vowel? Well, you see, vowel syncope, well, that might confuse you even more. Sorry for that. Basically, we have here, yet again, a phonotactical rule called vowel syncope, and I guess that is a pretty good time to mention that there is a linguistic lesson about phonotactics and syllable theory on this channel as well. Anyway, a vowel syncope is the loss of a sound, a vowel to be more precise, from the middle of a word. In our case, the thematic vowel. You see, in Old Norse, unstressed vowels, like the thematic vowels, were often dropped when the personal ending that followed began with a vowel, or other complex consonant clusters we are not going into yet. Which leads to the fact that kalla can either be first person singular, third person plural, or infinitive, depending on the context. Of course, the rule itself is not just two adjacent vowels cause the unstressed vowel to drop. That would be too easy. In Old Norse, the primary word stress consistently falls on the first syllable of the word, which would be the root syllable. Thus, the thematic vowel is always unstressed. Same goes for the personal endings, by the way. Now, the dropping of the thematic vowel is simply the byproduct of a larger overall rule. A rule about syllable structure. The age of syncope in Old Norse, which was around 500 to 700 AD, that radically shortened unstressed syllables in Old Norse. And of course, at some point I will talk about this as well, but more from a diachronic point of view, so it would be a linguistic lesson, but not an Old Norse lesson. But now, one last thing for this lesson. I mentioned earlier 3 ways of translating the Old Norse present. So let's take the example from earlier again, ek kalla. And by now the ending "a" should be known. So that is the thematic vowel and not a personal ending here. And again, we have 3 ways of translating the present tense from Old Norse to English, which would be I call, simple present, I'm calling, present progressive, and I do call, emphasizing the action, in this case the call. This also means if you have any of those 3 in English, you just can use the same sentence, ek kalla, for all 3 versions. And that's it already for this lesson.